construction industry this year are leftover United Workers' Party project. But I'll let Bradley speak more on that because he did a considerable amount of work on it.
Well, thank you. Good evening, viewers. Thank you, Laura. I'm happy to be accompanied by my senators and beautiful Laura this evening. As indicated by Senator Dominic earlier, it is a well-known fact that to jumpstart an economy, construction is a pillar. Any government who wants to really get things going, they would engage in significant construction projects. And Senator would be well aware that the last administration under the Prime Ministership of Honorable Alan Shastney, recognizing that, we engaged in a number of construction projects. And there are a few of them which honestly causes some hurt when I recognize when this government gave me that they stopped. And one of them being the Rodney Bay Road. And up to a day like today, this causes Saint Lucians significant pain, not just because of the discomfort, but because of the amount of loss of productivity as a result of the conditions of the road. We all knew this was a $15 million project. And I just want to let Saint Lucians know the number of things that came into that project. We all know it was a 1.3 kilometers of road. It involved 2 roundabouts. It had a median barrier. It was supposed to have been 4 lanes, a walkover, sidewalks were supposed to be covered, lighting and fixtures. In fact, the Lucilec poles were supposed to go beyond the sidewalks. So it's quite a bit of work. And it was really and truly a deal for the government at the time, because even now that we're hearing where an assessment is being done of the work done to date, has surpassed the $15 million, okay, and the project is not complete. So the government has really failed St. Lucians and will now be spending so much more in terms of completing this project and also, you know, getting a new contractor and paying the old contractor. But there's something that always comes up, and I think we need to clarify this evening. The government continues to indicate that the funds were available, funds that were given by the, I think it was the Q80 fund, to build this highway. But what this government fails to indicate to St. Lucians is that in that Q80 fund, there were various legal requirements. And one of the legal requirements was that to construct this highway from Grosley down, the government of St. Lucia would be responsible for acquiring several lots of land, private lands from people along that highway, which was, as you can well imagine, would be a significant cost. So that was one of the legal requirements under that loan arrangement. And the Q80 fund was very strict. The money would not go into acquiring any property. When we recognized that this was going to be a significant challenge, we indicated to the Q80s, let us, on our own, meaning the St. Lucian government, build that highway, and instead can these funds be diverted to the back roads. The Q80 government at the time did not agree, but after much negotiation, they agreed, okay, so what we can now provide you money with is to do the north-south highway, which is going through, I think it's Maki Estate, through Babono and coming out in Dennery, which we believe is something that the country has been trying to pursue for a very long time. So we thought that was an excellent deal, and so we decided we would engage in using our resources to build the highway. So I thought that was a great loss for the St. Lucian public. But as you were, and I thought it was important that I should start there, because the government stopped this highway. They stopped many of the housing construction projects that we had going, sent hundreds of people home, and you know, everybody, could you multiply that by 3 to 5 people per household, the number of people who were affected by that. And as I have said, and as I said in the last budget debate, had we continued with these projects, you could well imagine how better off we would have been performing economically. But that is done. But let's go through a number of the projects that this government is claiming to be their initiative, and they're saying that, you know, as a year of infrastructure, these are some of the things that they will be responsible for engaging. And you started by speaking about the Marriott at Point Seraphin. Laura, I could tell you without fear that the Marriott Hotel has nothing to do with this current administration. All the concessions for that hotel was negotiated by the last administration. As a Minister of Investment, I can tell you that document came to my desk from Invest Saint Lucia, and we brought it to Cabinet and was approved. In fact, there is a correlation with that Marriott hotel and also the original developers for the Saint Lucia hotel. And we also hear the government boasting about the Saint Lucia hotel, will be coming on stream. We all recall that in 2016, maybe about 2-3 weeks before before the elections in 2016, the then parliamentary rep for Choiseul Saltibus came and indicated that the Choiseul will be getting a hotel, and have always supported anything that would provide economic, activity in the community. So I supported it. Lo and behold, when we came into office, we recognized that not even the land was paid for. It was just a conversation. Some people were interested. And I could tell you, a lot of hard work went into the negotiating with these developers. We all remember the amount of public debate as it relates to, because one of the things this hotel wanted was that the road currently running through the property would have to be diverted. And there was, as a parliamentary rep, I could tell you, I got very much involved by trying to identify alternative routes for a new highway in Choiseul, because we recognize that the existing road that they wanted to use would have severe challenges as it relates to the narrowness of the road, the topography, and in a developing environment, you want to think for the future. So there was a lot of pullback because we had a lot of community engagements, and the people were not in favor of it. And so we had to really go into the bush to try to identify a new location. There was some difficulties with the current developers at the time, and I'm sure Saint Lucians would also remember there was a groundbreaking ceremony, but these developers, they had some difficulties in Bulgaria. The company was sold to a new developer. Negotiations continued, and we are here today with what is happening. So for the current government to try to take any sort of praise for this is truly false. With regards to canals, the Galaxy project, myself and Senator Fedee, we actually went to China to meet the developers. They were showing us some of their own developments that they had there. Now, we obviously do have a challenge with some of what we're hearing as it relates to the whole CIP and arrangement and everything. But for this government to say that they're responsible for bringing this development to Saint Lucia is also false. I spoke about Saint Lucia. We also know about the Mont Pima project. You would all recall that that property was in receivership, and Invest Saint Lucia, under the direction of the last administration, went ahead and purchased this property at Mont Pima, and also the property near, we call it
the Audi dealership.
That
next to what we call the wharf.
That's right. That's correct.
Yeah.
And these properties have been sold at a much higher price than what we paid for it. So automatically, Invest Saint Lucia has already made an immediate profit on that deal that was struck. And obviously, the land was in our possession, and then a new investor has come in. So for the government to want to take credit for this, because you would remember at almost every opportunity, the member for Castries Central tried to discredit the last administration for that purchase we did, which was a deal from a receivership standpoint. We also hear about the government trying to take praise for the recent groundbreaking ceremony at Rodney Bay, a private development doing a mall and a number of at the Pope site, correct. And I would tell you, Laura, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but the last administration, we brought to Parliament what is called the Headquarters Act. And in doing so, it was to encourage companies within the region, anywhere else, to come in, set up your headquarters in Saint Lucia. We will give you a number of concessions. There were a number of things, and that's what you call a government with foresight. There were a number of things we thought that in doing so, we'd be able to attract all kind of companies to Saint Lucia. And Digicel up in Gross is one of the companies that we attracted at headquarters. So there are a number of spin-offs from, as it relates to renting properties, the staff they would hire, a lot of the services that they would engage in, all of that would develop our country. So that Headquarters Act is as a direct result of this property being purchased in near the Pope site, and everything else that's coming with it is as a direct result of that Headquarters Act.
But that's the same developer who also did the Orange Grove.
That's correct, and I was going to spin off into there.
Yeah, and I noticed you have a wealth of information to disseminate to our viewers, and I think a lot of viewers have been asking, where is Bradley, where is Bradley? And now he's here. He has a wealth of information to disseminate, and I appeal to you to listen carefully, because a lot of the things that he's saying is eye-opening. When people say things, it's important to know what they're saying and have the facts, and this is what the roundtable is all about, the facts to either agree with or to disagree with. Now, Senator Stanislas, I know you want to jump in there, so before the Honorable Bradley Felix gives out all of the information, I want to bring you in there to weigh in on what we're talking about.
Thank you, Laura, and good evening to you and my colleague, Senator Fedee, Honorable Bradley Felix, and of course to our wonderful viewers. It's always a pleasure to be here at the round table and to discuss matters of importance to our country's development. If I may add to the discussion on construction, Laura, I believe that it is a travesty what the Labour Party has done to the construction sector in St. Lucia. Here you have a country which went through the devastation of COVID in 2019, where the entire economy was shut down as a result of this pandemic. And a visionary leader and a visionary government understands and understood the importance of construction as a stimulus for our economy. And of course, the gradual reopening of the tourism sector, which was completely decimated by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we always said, remember in my first episode, I always remind viewers that we always said that there must be a balance between lives and livelihoods. And we saw construction as one of those key elements of protecting the livelihoods of St. Lucians. And it was not costing the government, the taxpayers of St. Lucia, $1 at the time to undertake major infrastructural works to help stimulate the economy and bring relief to people in the country. What did we do? As part of our economic and social review strategy, we undertook the immediate rolling out of almost $1 billion worth of shovel-ready projects into the economy.
Explain what you mean when you see shovel-ready projects.
Shovel-ready projects which were been financed by private sector individuals, projects which were already on the books, ready to go without any delays, implemented immediately. So you want to rent a national airport, which was been financed by the loan from the Taiwanese government. And of course, the Taiwanese government, we had the contractor OACC, which is a Taiwanese company with a wealth of experience and expertise in airport construction and road construction and so on. We had the 2 housing projects of Talverd and Shock, which was a public partnership program, with the government and the private sector entity out there. We had the $150 million road rehabilitation project, national road rehabilitation project, where 3 contractors were identified, each with a $50 million package, and we had some other small projects. We had the cash reserve, I think, market redevelopment, etc. So all of these were shovel-ready projects which we just had to just roll out immediately.
I just want to ask a question before you continue. You said that the $150 million road rehabilitation project had 3 contractors identified, not 1,
3.
not 2, but 3 of them.
3. And those 3 contractors were Saint Lucian contractors, local contractors who came in with their own monies, their $50 million. They had the equipment, they subcontracted locals and so on into the works. And many persons were employed. I mean, if you speak to a number of Saint Lucians, they'll tell you things were better under COVID than it is right now. The number of truckers we had on the roads, the number of equipment owners were employed, and the trickle-down effect which all of this construction had on the economy in terms of vendors, fisher folks, butchers, farmers, small business owners, minibus operators. Everybody benefited from the onslaught of construction which took place during that time. And what happened? The people of Saint Lucia posed their confidence and trust in a Labour Party, which Mama guide the people with lies, deceit, propaganda into government. And the first thing they did when they came into office was to stop all those projects. And by stopping those projects, Laura, what happened? Thousands of St. Lucian men and women were placed on the breadline. Hundreds of trucks, equipment were left to rot. And persons were just placed in economic hardship under the Labour Party. Now, going into 2021, with what the construction which was started by us, we experienced, as Senator Fedee said, approximately 20% increase in the construction. Decline. 20% decline because of all the projects which were stopped. Had they not stopped those projects, it means that the increase in construction in 2021 could have been over 30%.
So that answers the question that I asked in the preamble. How did it affect all of those delays, all of the stoppages? How did it affect the economy?
Significantly, it affected our economic growth. It affected people's abilities to have disposable income, to support themselves, support their families, to pump into the economy, to keep driving this economy. Had they not stopped all those construction projects, we would have been better off today. We would have not been the slowest economy in the ECCU. We would have been the leaders in economic growth and development in the ECCU.
Another betrayal.
Another betrayal of the trust and confidence which the people placed in the St. Lucia Labour Party.
Okay, so I'm going to continue reading from where we left off. And we said that it includes an acceleration of works on the Marriott Hotel and on the Dreams and Zoe Tree Resort in Mico. In addition, works were undertaken on the Cabot St. Lucia property to complete the golf course. And
wow, do you remember, Laura? Jack don't want me to bathe on my beach.
Yep.
You remember that?
Yes, during
and now
COVID,
today,
the big...
This is one of the best golf courses in the world.
Everybody's there.
They're building villas. Some of the most exclusive real estate in the Caribbean is being constructed there right now. What does that tell you? It's very fascinating that the Economic and Social Review continues to mention all of these projects that we are so familiar with, that we had something to do with. And you heard Bradley Felix, who did an amazing job in outlining the steps that we had to take to get these projects from ideas to reality. It also mentions lower down the Orange Grove Plaza. I remember that the Orange Grove Plaza, I was not in politics then, the Labour Party convinced the country that what St. Lucians knew as the Daher Mall, that building was structurally unsound. Y'all remember that? In 2011, and none of us were in politics. We weren't actively in elective politics. And so the nation drank that Kool-Aid, that the Orange Grove Mall, the plaza today, was structurally unsound. Look at that building today. Look at that masterpiece. It's one of the best developments in the north. And you know what's a crying shame, Laura? Because of politics, that they have refused thus far to move any single government department in the top floor of the building that really belongs to the country. This is how the Labour Party is. This is how wicked they are. Right? The
so
two
they would
top
prefer
floors.
to have the government institutions, government offices spread out all over the place.
Correct.
Instead of having it in one location where persons can now, for ease of doing business, and remember, we're not very high up on the ease of doing business index, right? So the ease of doing business would have been helped tremendously. Correct. If you can just go in one place, you don't have problems with parking because there's sufficient parking. You don't have to leave one place, go to another place. You're pretty much covered in one location.
But I think it's very instructive when we speak on Orange Grove. We always hear, and another thing we need to pay attention to, this government is extremely good in playing on words, just like the carbot that you mentioned. They said after extensive renegotiations, tell us what are the extensive renegotiations, but let's go back to Orange Grove. They continue to say that we sold the property for $13 million when in fact the property was worth $65 million. But they failed to say that after 15 years, the second and the third floor belongs to the government and people of Saint Lucia. Okay? Because as you rightly said, this building was a derelict. We heard engineers saying that structural integrity, we heard all of that. We got an opportunity for somebody to come and spend their money, okay? Fix it, okay? Lease it back to the government, okay? And after 15 years, the second and the third floor belongs to the government. Isn't that value for money?
I wonder where these engineers are now. Those who were saying that it was a derelict and that it was structurally unsound and that it was a bad investment. But we'll come back to that.
The same engineers who are telling us that the old St. Jude's is the best way to go. Those are the people.
That's right. And if I may add on Orange Grove as well, Laura, as Honorable Bradley articulated, the second and third floor of the building belongs to the government and people of Saint Lucia. And we are all over the place renting at $5, $6, $7 from persons. Whereas the rent up there, if I stand corrected, is $4 a square foot.
So immediately, moving in, the government of Saint Lucia, and by extension, the people of Saint Lucia, are recognizing
savings.
Immense savings.
And these are savings on recurrent expenditure, which could go into some other program, project to benefit the people of St. Lucia.
And I want you to put a pin on that, because later on in the program, we'll talk about debt servicing, and we'll talk about our debt to GDP ratio and how we are almost bankrupt to the point of not being able to service our debt, right? So we are out of time for this segment, but when we come back, we'll talk about a little bit more about the construction, and then we'll segue into our debt servicing. And trust me, St. Lucia, it promises to be a doozy. Stay tuned.
This levy will not be imposed on any food items. This means, Mr. Speaker, that the cost of food should not change because of the levy.
Philip J. Pierre says that all state funds should go into the consolidated fund. Here are some examples of Philip J. Pierre's hypocrisy. As we speak, work on the rehabilitation of the Millennium Highway is ongoing. This project is financed by the Caribbean Development Bank. CDB pays the contractor for the Millennium Highway directly. The funds do not go into the consolidated fund. Philip J. Pierre also happens to be the current chairman of CDB. Why aren't the funds going into the consolidated fund if the practice is so unusual as he makes it out to be? Funds from St. Lucia's Citizenship by Investment program also do not go into the consolidated fund. In 2022, the government of St. Lucia collected a whopping $51 million from the Citizenship by Investment program. Not 1 cent was put into the consolidated fund. What have they done with all this money? Why isn't it going into the consolidated fund? The same contractor that Philip J. Pierre is accusing of facilitating corruption was just awarded a major contract for the new air traffic control tower at Huanora International Airport, and payments will go directly to their account in Panama. In other words, this means that money is not coming into the consolidated fund. Why would a prime minister deliberately spread propaganda and misinformation regarding a practice he follows himself? Why the hypocrisy? What is Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre trying to distract you from? We can't trust Pierre.
Welcome back, Saint Lucia. Before we went on break, we were talking about construction and all of the leftover projects, or the projects that were left over by the previous administration, which this current government is somewhat trying to take ownership of, praise and accolades for. And we're talking about projects such as the Marriott Hotel, we're talking about Cabot, we're talking about Orange Grove, to name a few. But there are some other construction works left over by the previous administration, which this administration would like to say that they spearheaded or pioneered. Let me continue from our report card. In the last segment, we were reading from the report card and we were dissecting what the words really mean. So we continue. Public sector construction expenditure inched up by 1.5% to $162.3 million in 2023, reflecting similar increases by both the central government and statutory bodies. Major central government construction encompassed continued works on the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, the DVRP, the Millennium Highway West Coast Road upgrade, including the new roundabout at Cul-de-Sac and the Constituency Development Program. In addition to several other roadworks across the island, activity resumed on the buildings under the St. Jude Hospital Reconstruction Project. Statutory body construction featured works at the Huanora International Airport, including commencement of a new tower, works on the Grosile Divisional Police Headquarters, and repairs to various police stations. Works on the Carolec building was completed in 2023. As a result of these and other developments, the value of imports of construction materials rose by 8.8% to $212.4 million in 2023, also reflecting increases in the imported prices of some items.
Well, another reflection again, Laura. I mean, you've mentioned HIA, you've mentioned the West Coast Road project, you've mentioned St. Jude's. All of these are leftover projects which we have instituted. Under the DVRP, I know Honorable Bradley Felix has got a long list that he could mention as well. In the public sector, the Cul-de-Sac Bridge comes to mind. That this was finished. How long ago? 2021? This was finished? And they are waiting on this rather poor implementation of the Millennium Highway project. And what is happening there is an absolute travesty. We see that, I recall that when we sat in the cabinet and the former administration, they were looking at the north-south road, but they never had enough monies to finish the north-south road, and we were using funds from the British government, a grant that was given to Saint Lucia as part of a regional initiative by David Cameron when he was Prime Minister, going way back to that. And so we came into government and recognized that the Labour Party, they were struggling to implement the north-south highway because they just didn't have monies to finish it. This monies allocated by the UK government wasn't enough. So then we thought that it was important to then change the project to the West Coast, because this is a very important economic artery going all the way to Soufrière, where Herod has got all of these crucial tourism sites. And then it is a critical link road between the hotel sector in the north, including Port Castries cruise ships and the hotels for the north, and the town of Soufrière. So it's was very, very crucial that this road be done. But I'm sure that Bradley has got others that he want to chime in as well.
Yes, and under the DVRP, I'm happy you mentioned the DVRP. We must be cognizant that the DVRP obviously was a program where a number of projects had been identified. And I could tell you, had it not been for some of those that we did in the community of Choiseul Saltibus, there would have been absolutely no economic activity, government base in this community. I could tell you the PI bridge, after much consultation with the community, you would notice the beautiful designs of the drums on the bridge. It was a direct result of the community's input. We have the PI and the Roblo Community Center. That in itself is a concern for us as citizens of the community of Choiseul Saltibus, because it's almost a year. In fact, I think June will be a year since both of these projects have been completed, and they have not been officially handed over to the community. And there's a major problem, because we are all aware that some of these structures, when you give some of these contracts, there's what is called a defects liability period, by which what that means is when you use the facility, if you identify any defects, the total repair of it is for the contractor. Now that we are going to go whenever into these structures, it means that if anything is faulty, the cost goes on the government. Okay.
Can you tell us why? Because I know lately these community centers have featured prominently in social media. You're walking the grounds and people are talking about it. And not too long ago, there was a video circulating with regard to the state of disrepair that at least the one in PI has undergone. I mean, there seems to be nobody there taking care of. There's no caretaker taking care of the community center. You could see where grass was cut and left to languish. I mean, palm trees were planted. They're all dead now. Why is it that these community centers are not yet commissioned?
I saw that video and I said to myself, that is a passionate resident. That's a resident who's so concerned that a structure that was completed so long ago could not have been, open and for use and for the use of the public. My inquiries suggest that the properties were not put in use because insurance had not been paid or not been put in place. I would wish for somebody to say otherwise or to confirm what really is the reason for the delay. I brought it up at our last parliamentary debate when we were debating the budget, and the Prime Minister did indicate that he would look into it. So I'm hoping very soon we would see some action with regard to that, because there are lots of community groups who want to use the centers for one reason or the other. So I was saying that these are some of the projects, that we have put in place to continue economic activity in the community. We have the Choiseul Fish Pot, which is another major project happening in the community of Choiseul, and many people would remember that accompanying myself and the Minister of Agriculture at the time, we brought along 2 fishermen from the community of Choiseul to Japan, okay, and we negotiated for what is happening right now. If you pass in Choiseul right now, I love the work that's going on. I'm hoping that it will really solve the issue with regards to the silt that comes into the pond, and that the fishermen and the community will benefit, because we at the last administration had a major plan to accompany that revitalization of the waterfront. I'm hoping that the government will see it fit, particularly in their community tourism drive, to see fit to continue the plans that we had for the area. So there's a lot happening. We also went, and Laura, I think it's very important that I mention that, because it's something that I spoke to at the last budget debate, when I was indicating to the government, when we speak about the year of infrastructure, I was thinking that one of the first areas they would highlight would have been our water infrastructure, WASCO infrastructure. And I spoke specifically about that, because I'm seeing, and maybe it's not a sexy enough project, maybe it does not bring in, the kind of political mileage, but it is such a basic thing. And as we say, water is life.
And every single citizen requires water.
Especially at this point in time, we know there's a drought, okay? And I really thought the government would have provided a lot more assistance to Wasco. We know when we were doing the Rodney Bay Road, the government spent about $5 million in purchasing pipes, in addition to the labor costs, okay, to replace rotten pipes, underground, and we something we saw that was critical, and I think the government erred in advertising this year as a year of infrastructure and Wasco not being prominent.
I'm not sure how you guys feel about it, but I think for when I hear infrastructure, I'm not hearing that kind of infrastructure. I'm hearing more construction, more roads and stuff like that. I'm not really hearing much about water and those other types of infrastructure that are critical to everyday living for St. Lucians.
Wasco has just announced that they are going to not accept new applications or new connections for the next 3 months. Where are we living? What is this about? Do we have a government in place that cannot manage the country sufficiently that if you're trying to build a house, that if you are trying to set up a business that require a water connection, it means that you can't be connected? What are you supposed to do with your plans? And this is the state that our water infrastructure has actually reached in the country. So Bradley is absolutely right when he said that, look, this is not just basic, this is absolutely essential. And Wasco making this announcement, the government must really do something urgently. And this is one of the most important and crucial initiatives that they could undertake to ensure that a critical component of our infrastructure is dealt with.
Now, I'm concerned about this, and there's a reason why I ask you to repeat that 3-month moratorium or hiatus, because I can imagine there are lots of implications for new homeowners, because the banks are continuing to give loans for new homes. So I'm taking a loan to build my home, and for 3 months, immediately you start the home building, you need water, to mix your concrete and whatnot. So what are the implications for new homeowners? Are we saying that persons with the aspirations of owning their homes need to put that on pause for 3 months?
Well, you would need to ask Wasco, but but the announcement is absolutely shocking.
Yeah, if I may chime in there, Laura, what Senator Fedee is saying there is very, very scary.
It is scary.
And it tells you that this government is failing on all fronts.
They have no ideas, nothing.
And as Bradley articulated earlier on, I don't think there can be any national development if there is not a sustainable plan for water, for persons to access clean water into their homes, into the businesses, into the communities. And so far, we have not heard any plans from this government as to how they are going to assist Wasco in dealing with the current water crisis we have throughout the length and breadth of this country. And if we are to put a hold on new water connections for the next 3 months, it means that we are in a lot of problems in this country.
It also means that farmers can expect not to be placed on the priority list because they're already not, and our food security continues to be shaky at best, because if the farmers can't get water to irrigate, especially at this time, and it is so vitally important, then we can consider us not having a food security plan. We can consider the farmers are left to languish and be at their own devices because no water.
That's right. This is a national crisis that must be dealt with urgently, because the repercussions are going to be so dire. that it's going to be very hard for us to recover from this. You're talking about investments, you're talking about the confidence of the country. What kind of message are we sending to international partners that we need to work and develop the country? But just the mere existence of people. People are going in communities without water for weeks.
And this is a country that depends on tourism, so it's even more dire. But while we're on the topic of the year of infrastructure, I want to touch on a topic that has been a little hot lately, and I think I want to say there is no justice. There's no justice in this place. For St. Lucians, because we continue to see that the betrayal, and I'm talking about the halls of justice. Can we shed some light on that? I mean, it's the year of infrastructure. We're talking about creating this halls of justice that we have been talking about and we have been denied for so long.
But Laura, you know what's unfortunate? You're asking the question, and I don't think I can answer, if any, what you call conviction. You know why? Because there's no information. There's insufficient information in our local circles. Mm-hmm. We actually have more information coming out of Trinidad with regards to the halls of justice.
And okay? that is unfair.
And that's really, really unfortunate. But there have been a lot of concerns. One of the things that struck me when I saw sort of a social media post, we're breaking ground on the halls of justice. There's a billboard, and if you remember, one of the things they always criticized the last administration was graphics, fancy drawings and everything like that, So we're breaking ground on a project, and DCA approval is not in place. DCA approval is nowhere near in place. Now, how do you know that DCA is going to be in agreement with one, the location, with one, the structural integrity in terms of, I've heard if anything have to go in there, there's going to be significant piling done. Piling is, if anybody is familiar with piling, there's a lot of vibration, how it's going to affect surrounding buildings.
Now,
we know
put a pause there, just pause there. Tell the people of Saint Lucia where exactly the halls of justice is earmarked to be.
Next to Hobbies.
No. It's actually opposite the cathedral.
But it comes across the building next to Hobbies, and it goes across to
when the old Ministry of Education. Well, the younger people will not know where the old Ministry of Education.
Yeah, so the building next to Hobbies.
But, it's right opposite the cathedral.
That
where
main
the
entry on Mickwood
Street.
Yes.
Old courthouse was. Mm-hmm. It's a place where people sit around quite a bit. So this is in the center of town.
Near a national landmark.
That's right.
Because at one point the cathedral was, and I have to ask, is it now the minor basilica? Because it was called the minor basilica at one point. So that means it is a national landmark. And we're talking about all sorts of other landmarks, and the National Trust is involved in all sorts of things. But this one, right in the center of town, amid all of the congestion that already exists as is, with no construction happening, we're talking about putting the halls of justice, and from what I understand, there will be a crossover, so it takes both sides of the road.
Correct. And the water table in that area is extremely high. I was telling a colleague of mine, because I grew up in the CDC, I was telling a colleague of mine, I always remember in the kitchen, there was a hole, and you would drop a stone or pebble and you'd hear the water plop right there in the CDC, right by the town hall. So the water table in this area is very, very high. I remember when my former workplace, Banco Saint Lucia, was being constructed, I remember one of the initial plans was that they would have underground parking, and that had to be disbanded because the water table would not have allowed it, So it's a concern, especially with the age of a lot of the buildings surrounding where that construction is going to be.
That will affect the library as well.
I mean,
the central library, which and it survived a critical era in our history, the Cashier's Fire.
But what struck me is when, as Prime Minister, Alan Chasney said that the courthouse needed to be demolished. Mm-hmm. You all remember that? What was the response of the Labour Party? That should never happen. Mm-hmm. This is part of our patrimony and all that kind of stuff. What are they doing? Are they Are they renovating the old courthouse building? Well, I think that the courthouse is down for demolition, and this is the kind of duplicity, this is the kind of double standard that we continue to see from the Labour Party. But I think the most important issue here, Laura, is the financing of this building and the numbers as it relates to this deal. So the government has announced that they're building a 33,000 square feet building. 33,000 square feet building at a cost of $165 million. In fact, my error, it's not the government. The developer, the contractor from Trinidad, which is NH, said so in the Trinidad Guardian.
Just hold on. And it goes back to what the Bradley was saying.
Correct.
About we have no information. This is affecting us in Saint Lucia. We have no information, direct information, because ground is being broken. The media is not invited. We are not getting any information. And it reminds me of years ago when under Kenny Anthony administration, there was this piece of legislature which was about to be passed, if not for vigilant opposition members, about muzzling the media. In effect, it would be 361. And so it wasn't passed, but I think that 361 is in effect, because we continuously see groundbreaking.
I mean, the media was not invited to the ceremony, and the media was not invited to the signing ceremony of GPH as well. But I want to come back, Laura, to the finances of the deal. $165 million to construct a 33,000 square foot building would mean that it's approximately $4,900 per square foot in terms of construction costs.
Say that again, repeat. $4,900 per
almost
square foot.
Almost $5,000 per square foot.
This is being what almost a square foot?
Yes. So that is the construction cost announced in Trinidad by the developer NH. The leader of the opposition and the deputy political leader, they had a press conference on Tuesday expressing their concerns about the deal. I have not seen any response from Philip J. Pierre nor anyone in government to come out and to actually deny that those figures that we have raised concerns about are not true. So right now I'm assuming that the cost that we have actually analyzed is actually true. Then that does not include the financing. So the bolt, which means it's constructed on a bolt arrangement, which means to build. So NH is going to build. They're going to own. They're going to lease, and then they will transfer. So they have it for 12 years. And all that time, we will be paying NH rent as well.
So I see a trend here.
Yeah.
We are taking our patrimony, that's what they like to use, giving it to outside forces, and we have to pay them.
Correct.
We're taking away our things. So you have a house, you're giving it to me, and then you're paying me rent.
Yes. Now, I don't have a problem with PPPs, but I do have a problem when a PPP is a bad deal. This is a bad deal. This is the worst deal I've seen in the history of project development in Saint Lucia. And the only thing that comes second to this is Global Ports Holdings. Now, Laura, I called around a few contractors. To build a residential home in Saint Lucia per square foot, the average is $270. To build an office building in Castries, is some contractors said 500, the highest I was quoted was 750, and by a very reputable contractor in this country. So let's just say that the $750 amount per square foot was on the high side, but this is what's the going rate. The government has signed a deal where it is for $5,000 per square foot. I mean, what are they building this building? Is it in gold? Will the glass windows be in diamond? I mean, I'm trying to understand it. And so if this information is incorrect, we are pleading to the government to come out and to clarify what is really going on. But this is a complete disaster that the government would actually allow this information to fester. Now, they're quick to say that we want to destroy Saint Lucia. We don't want the halls of justice. We don't want to progress the judicial system. This is not what this is about. All of the cries from the opposition, whether it's on the CIP program, whether it's on GPH, and now this halls of justice, we have got to say to the people of Saint Lucia what the absolute truth is. And the frank and full disclosure is needed. People must be leveled with to know, why are you taking our state resources? The state owns the land by the courthouse. The state owns the other site, which is the building next to Hobbies, the old Ministry of Education building. That land, which the state owns, is going to be used as security for the developer's loan as he goes out and he seeks financing. But Laura, the other important cost is the financing cost to finance this. Yeah? So I did not see anything in the Trinidad article which speaks to the interest rate that we, the taxpayers of this country, will have to pay back. But the NH developer said that in order to make this bolt a shorter term, that they are going to have a higher interest rate, and they are negotiating. Now, the developer said something that is very interesting. So he has got another company in Trinidad which also does financing. So Republic Bank is going to be the principal lender in what is called a syndicate financing arrangement. And the developer himself is going to go and use his company as one of the syndicates. Did you hear what I just said you?
I heard you.
So this is, I mean, if I was in the streets, I would say that someone is bending me over. But I'm not going to complete the rest. But this is a bad deal. This is a horror story.
So I want to break it down in a way that the common man understands.
Yes.
You're saying that we're paying this person to build something, and he's using his own company
to also, so one is
to help finance it.
Correct.
To get it from bank.
To get it with the bank. So we're paying him interest, we're paying him rent, and we're paying him construction costs. So he's making three profits. He's making the profit on you and me, the taxpayers of this country, on construction costs, which is crazy high. He's making money on rent.
Because he's renting it to us.
Renting it to us, and far higher than what the developer is going to rent the office buildings at the Orange Grove Mall. Far higher. And then he's going to now put in some of his money to finance it and
so
charge
he's getting interest.
So he's making three different profits.
Let me ask a question. What happened to NIPRO?
NIPRO, I'm told, was at the opening ceremony. I don't imagine that Bradley was there or was invited. Yeah. But I was told that NIPRO and NIC attended. But, it is left to speculate what their role is.
But if I may add on the NIPRO question, Laura, NIPRO was at the opening ceremony, as Senator Fedee articulated. But the Prime Minister, the government said that NIPRO is going to provide, I think, project management services on the project. And you have to ask yourself, if NIPRO is not involved in the Bolt agreement, what authority do they have to provide project management oversight over this project? So there are lots of unanswered questions with this arrangement. And as Dominic articulated, and Bradley, the piling is going to be a major issue in the city there with all those historical buildings there. You have a company who is coming to build $165 million halls of justice, does not own the land, but yet still is using the state's property, the state's land, as collateral to secure the monies. what is going on? Does that make any sense whatsoever?
I know we're due for a break, Laura, but before we go for the break, there's something that, I think one of the things that we're missing in all of that is, are we thinking about the future when we're building such structures? We know in the past, what you call town and country planning seems to be non-existent, because if that was in existence, we would not have had a problem in terms of what I said earlier about acquiring lands to Castries to Groseley Highway, because there would have been sufficient buffer for us to have put in place for future development. But we have put in a structure in an already congested city of Castries, okay? And we're talking about how will that affect our future in terms of any sort of development in the city? And I was just thinking, how is that going to affect various activities in the city itself? Isn't that the route for Carnival? Isn't that, how is that going to affect the whole construction? All of these things. Have we thought about these things? Parking, traffic, any little thing happening in the city creates a backup that affects productivity, and productivity is one of the things I'm very concerned about, because we see so much of that being lost in our country. If there's a major funeral and there's a major court case at the same time, I think First Deputy Leader Guy Joseph said something with regards to, we're talking about a major court case being held in there. How will the city be shut down?
These are things.
If there's a jailbreak, that must go in the equation.
There are always chinks in the link when you're transferring criminals or anybody from one point to another. There's always that opportunity, and we do know we have a track record of not being able, for the most part, to recapture, especially criminals that are of
non-nationals.
Yeah, and criminals have become so sophisticated right now, and you have some major criminals out there, and over the years you're going to get even more criminals out there. And if you have a major, like Bradley says, if there's a major court case going on in the center of the town there with one of those so-called major criminals, how do you deal with the traffic? What do you do? Do you shut down the city? Do you divert traffic and the bottlenecks and everything? So these are many concerns. But also I want to add to the halls of justice, Laura. The former administration, we had a plan for halls of justice. And the location, the site, was the old police headquarters on Upper Bridge Street. I know extensive negotiations and consultations were done with the police, Bradley, with the judiciary, and many other groupings, and it was decided that this was the best location to have had the new police headquarters as well as the halls of justice with 6 courts in that area. There is an exit road, I think, to the back of it, Bradley, if I remember, which goes behind the Ferrans dairy area. So it would have been easy to come in and out of that area. And from what I recall, it was not going to be costing so much money. The initial cost, if I remember, for this House of Justice was just between $50 and $60 million. And negotiations was already underway with NIPRO to finance and build this on a bold agreement. I know there was 1 or 2 private individuals in Saint Lucia who were also interested in going into this arrangement with the government at the time of our administration. So I'm very perturbed that all those individuals, the police, the judiciary, and so on, the magistracy, all of them who had agreed, had agreed earlier during the last administration's tenure that this was the best location for the halls of justice. Did they have any say in the choosing of this new location? Also, the church, was the church involved in the consultation to build this new halls of justice right next to the cathedral? So I mean, this is very concerning. There are lots of unanswered questions coming from the government. We are still left to speculate as usual by this government, and they tout accountability and truth and transparency, but all we get is betrayal of the truth and accountability and transparency by this government to the people of Saint Lucia.
We're due for a break, but when we come back, And while we're on the break, I want you to think about all that has been said with regard to continued unplanned development in our cities. I want you to think about the muzzling of the media, because we know in the absence of information, speculation is king. And when people begin to come up with those fantastic conspiracy theories, it does not look good. It does not bode well. So think about what you've heard in this segment, and when we come back, we did not touch on the debt servicing, but when we come back, we'll deal with this and more. Stay tuned.
This levy will not be imposed on any food items. This means, Mr. Speaker, that the cost of food should not change because of the levy.
Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre claims that no other CARICOM countries have received funds from Saudi Arabia, and that the $75 million United States loan that he has taken for St. Jude was because of his government's hard work. Here is the truth. Antigua has received $80 million US, Guyana has received $150 million US, Grenada has received $100 million US, Belize has received $77 million US, Bahamas has received $12 million US, and St. Vincent received $10 million. We can't trust Pierre.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying tuned to the Round Table. A nation's capacity to offer fundamental services such as healthcare and education is hampered quite often by its increasing debt load. In Saint Lucia, our debts appear to have not only increased, but also gotten more expensive and riskier. But don't take my word for it. I will refer your attention to our report card, the Economic and Social Review. Public debt. The official stock of public debt, which comprises central government, government-guaranteed and non-guaranteed debt, increased by 8.8% to $4,783.5 million at the end of December 2023.
Yeah, so that's $4.7 odd billion. And what you've just said is that has increased by almost 9% in new debt that the government has taken. The total figure that I saw lower down was that they have borrowed some $388 million, which represents the highest that any government has borrowed, including the Alan Shastney COVID years. In any given calendar year, this Labour Party government has borrowed more than anybody in one single calendar year.
Are you saying that despite the Madi Poitier that was dubbed all of during COVID, they have surpassed Madi Poitier?
They have surpassed Madi Poitier in the best of economic times. Because remember, the world was going through COVID, and a lot of countries had to increase their borrowing. Interestingly, if you went back to what the Alan Shastney years were, you will see, and I think it's on maybe 127 or 129, go to that table and you'll be able to read out, go to page 129.
129.
And you'll be able to read out what those years were, the debt to GDP. You would see that on this page, it's at 72.9. So remember, 72.9 is what it is. But look at the years. What are we now? This is page 129. Look at the debt to GDP ratio. So public debt to GDP ratio, we see it was 62% in 2013, 60%, 60.7 in 2014, 61.5 in 2015. 60.9 in
2016,
And then look at how Alan Chasney started performing, bringing down the debt rate. So what have you got? 58.9, 59.94, 60.4. So it's important, Laura, to realize that economists will tell you that prudential limits, or in only exceptional circumstances, the debt should be at 60%. Alan Chasney has performed as Minister of Finance below that in 2 of his years, and just about prudential levels. We were dealing with an economic recovery situation in the Kenny Anthony years, where you had negative growth in the GDP. And if you look at the GDP section, you will see that these corresponding high debt rates from the Kenny Anthony years, they corresponded with very low economic growth. So we were borrowing, as we are now on the labor, faster than we are making money. And that's trouble for the country. Now, look at COVID, of course, it went up. But then after COVID, look at what this Labour Party administration, they continue to pile on debt and debt and debt. So in the last 2 years, in 2020, they have actually borrowed over 9% of debt. So in the last 2 years, they have piled up 16% of debt, and to bring it to now $4.7 billion. Now at 72.9%, that is a dangerous figure to be at, because the ECCB has a set target for countries to be at 60%, which is prudential limits. The Labour Party is over prudential limits by 13%, which is in the double digits, and that's very, very high. So that tells us that every single dollar that Saint Lucia makes, we have 73 cents in debt. Every dollar that we make in the country, in the public and private sector, we have 73 cents
to go to debt.
To debt. I don't think that'll make a banker like Bradley happy.
But Dominic, if I can simplify it even further, and I want to break it down in terms of an individual, and that's very, very basic. You go to the bank and you ask for a loan, whether it be to build a house, to buy a car, and the bank tells you that this is what your repayment is going to be. You tell the bank, oh, of course, after I pay all my other loans and I pay courts and whatever, I can pay that. The bank will tell you, yes, it appears that you can pay that, but my concern is, how will you eat? How will you buy clothes for your children? How will you pay your electricity bill? Because even if on the surface it does appear that you have the ability to pay back that loan, there are other very foundational issues with regards to you being able to survive. Okay? And that is really what's happening there. So as you rightfully said, for every dollar the country makes, they're spending 73 cents. Okay? Which means that the country only has 27 cents to do everything else. Okay? And the question is that sustainable? Is it sustainable? We're not a country with diamonds or gold or oil or anything like that. Okay? We sell ourselves. We're tourism based. You understand? And in itself, while it is the bloodline of our country, in itself it's a fickle industry, and you know that. Okay? So anything, one hurricane, as we saw, one COVID, okay, what it can do to a country. So you need to have a sufficient enough buffer for in these uncertain times, okay, that you can fall back on. At 73%, you don't have that. Okay, and that is the concern that we are guarding against when we speak to the countries' debt income ratio. Right.
But Philip J. Pierre has fooled the people of Saint Lucia on this matter and continues to mislead. And I know Herod has to jump in, but it gets me so angry every time, because what they've basically done, Laura, is that they've got big rhetoric and low delivery. He has done nothing to improve the debt of the country, as the Economic and Social Review shows.
When we were on break, Honorable Bradley Felix said, they know how to use their words. You know, this is something that I always use to my little nieces and nephews. Use your words. Use your words. Explain what it is they have exceptional control over their words. They know how to use their words to murmur guide the people, and as Senator Stanislas would say, betray the people.
Well, Laura, the Economic and Social Review have clearly exposed the hypocrisy of the Saint Lucia Labour Party and this government. This is a government which demonized the then United Workers' Party administration for borrowing. This is a prime minister when he was our grandchildren are ones who are going to be paying those loans. And today, in 3 years, out of the COVID pandemic, the crisis, he has borrowed over $380 million in a financial year. Wow. He has brought the debt to GDP ratio to 72.9% over the prudential limit.
My favorite, I'm sorry to cut you, but my favorite has always been when we used to go to Parliament, when we were in government, the Labour Party. One of the things the then opposition leader would always say, and current Prime Minister, is, I am so scared because when we come into office, we will not be able to borrow.
Yes.
You know, we will not be able to borrow. How are we going to borrow?
Right.
You know, and he has come in now because you have left such a solid foundation. You've come in and he's been able to borrow so much more than we have ever borrowed. You know,
and he's not going through any crisis. You know, there is no crisis like the pandemic, where you lose $1 billion in your GDP, where economy contracted by 24.5%, and he has borrowed excessively more. Our interest, our debt servicing interest payments have ballooned over $340 million in interest payments to service debt.
As you're saying this,
an increase of what, over 16%.
Now that you're saying this, I do not want you, Saint Lucia, to think that he is pulling these figures out of thin air. It is encompassed within the Economic and Social Review, which is our report card. And I read debt servicing in 2023. Net total debt service payments increased by 17.2% to $331.3 million, accounting for 25.3% of current revenue, up from 24.5% in 2022.
You know what that means? If we can put that in simple mathematics for the Saint Lucian people to understand that this government right now, the taxpayers of this country, are paying over $27 million a month to service debt. You work out the mathematics again. We, the taxpayers of this country, we are paying approximately $1 million a day to service the debt of this country. And those figures are going to keep on climbing because this government is going to continue coming to borrow, and nothing to show for the borrowing.
After last week, I didn't think anything was going to surprise me again. I didn't think anything was going to surprise me again. And yet you have dropped a bombshell. $1 million in debt per day. That this country, that the poor people of this country is expected to pay in servicing debt.
And it is going to continue to increase. In 3 years, this government have borrowed up almost $1 billion.
Yeah, but you see, here is where the Economic and Social Review has really tied the hands of Philip J. Pierre. As they say in ancillary canaries, it says that debt servicing has increased 17%. It means that by almost 20%, the cost of borrowing, the cost of interest has gone up under Philip J. Pierre. So what does that tell you, Laura? That if in last year alone, that interest rates went up interest and principal went up by 17%, right? In comparison to 2022. You can't blame UWP for that, you know.
No, but
that's
they are.
you. This is you.
Because now you're standing on your own. There is nothing that should have been left over from the previous administration in 2023 after they demitted office in 2021 that could possibly be directed at these figures?
Exactly. And I heard Bradley arguing in Parliament. They came with a motion to borrow, to get some bonds, $64 million in total. And the point was made by Bradley that the interest rate was a maximum of 7.5%. What's the normal, Bradley?
That's almost double.
Yep.
So when you now have almost gone out and you're saying to yourself that I am willing to pay a maximum interest rate of 7.5%, it shows that you don't have confidence. It shows that the market does not have appetite for St. Lucia's government bonds. And in order to make the market be attractive to St. Lucia's bonds, St. Lucia has got to pay a higher interest rate.
That reminds me of shock loaning. You know what I mean? Like you want a loan, but you can't get it through the normal channels, right? You can't get to go through a bank because your debt is too high for any commercial bank. So you go to these shady characters and they give you the money willingly, but at an exorbitant interest rate that you almost cannot pay back when the time is due for you to pay back the loan. But it's interesting to you, it's exciting to you because you need that money, and these are the only people that can borrow it to you. So they,
Yeah.
So it's not very often that I'm at loss for words.
You have debt servicing. You have the debt now stock, which grew by 8.8 is what you said, and then the GDP grew by 2.2%. So that tells you that the country is borrowing faster than it's making money.
4 times.
And 4
So
times.
just imagine you were that individual going to the banker Bradley to get a loan, and he says to you, well, look, in the last year your debt has grown 4 times more than your income. This is a very, very negative and troublesome trend that your finances are in as a personal individual. You would want to be making more money faster than you're borrowing,
right,
so that you don't go bankrupt. In the case of this country, we are in a very, very sticky situation.
But we are told our economy is growing.
Inflation is also faster than the pace at which people are making money. So it says that the GDP on average is 2.2. Inflation is over 4%. Double cost of living.
So
in
you're
this
going to
country
the
is
stores
double.
and you're paying twice as much for your grocery, your basket of food, but your income is not even growing by, it's not growing as fast a rate as your expenses.
That's right. And
Correct.
When you look at this debt to GDP ratio, this is very, very worrying for St. Lucia.
Absolutely.
There are consequences to this.
And I think at some point we have to start thinking about it personally, on a personal level, for us to understand the implications of it on a nationwide
So it means
level.
that the government now have less money to spend on
Healthcare,
There is
education.
less to spend on education, less to spend on agriculture, less to spend on social services, less to spend on infrastructure. And at the end of the day, the people of St. Lucia are the ones who are going to pay for it. They are the ones who are going to suffer because of this government's incompetence, their inability to manage the debt of this country, to have the debt to be on a sustainable path in this country.
So go to
Very,
page-
very consequential.
Page
for
65,
us.
just come back a little bit and you'll see what page 65, it talks about debt held in bonds. So you must differentiate between bonds and loans. So loans are like when you go to the CDB or you go to the World Bank or you get a loan from the ECCB at times. These are more long-term loans with lower interest rates. Bonds are usually shorter-term instruments. you go out in the market and you get private individuals or national insurance funds from around the Caribbean mostly, or banks would also buy government bonds. Because these are shorter in terms of the term, you pay a higher interest. Now, our stock of government bonds, the shorter loans, are also going in the right direction. Read what the Economic and Social Review says. Debt held in bonds, yeah.
Debt held in bonds represented the second largest share of 37.7%, growing by 11.8% to 1,006.
No, that's not 1,000.
That's 1 billion.
1 billion.
1 billion.
1,693,000,000.7 million.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have a significant stock of short-term borrowing on the books of Saint Lucia. This Philip J. administration, just last year alone, they grew the bonds by 11.8%. That's almost 12% that they have grown the short-term bonds. Hence, you've got an increase in the interest rate, because the shorter the loan, the higher the interest rate. And so treasury bills and bonds are accounting significantly for an increased stock of debt. We see that treasury bills went down slightly, but not able to compensate for the high pace at which the bonds actually grew.
Wow.
So that in itself has brought about a significant situation. You know, I've spoken to bankers like Bradley, and when you speak to them, they tell you that if Saint Lucia had to float its bonds outside of the Caribbean, it would be considered junk bonds. That is because the country's fiscal indicators, its debt to GDP ratio, its deficit as a percentage of the GDP, they're all in a very precarious situation that no one expresses confidence to pay them a normal interest rate. So usually you find that Saint Lucia is stuck within the regional government securities market, which is the RGSM, to get its loans. Because if it went out into, let's say, the UX stock exchange and other stock exchanges like the London Stock Exchange, it would really be in a very difficult bind to get loans at a very acceptable interest rate, because they see Saint Lucia as high risk. And whether we want to put it and twist it, regardless of what Philip J. says, we are in deep trouble in this country. And there's a lot of work that has to be done to repair the finances of the country, to make sure that the macroeconomic indicators are in a better position than they are now, so that the world will have more confidence in us. And you can then have a more diverse source of loans to come into the country at decent interest rates. When the government floats a bond at 7.5% as the maximum interest rate that it's willing to pay, the government knows what time it is. So when they talk about fiscal prudent management and all that stuff, that's just politics. That's just a lot of political nonsense, which does not happen in reality. So then another thing that struck me, if you go to page, let's see, page 68, 69, you'll see interest payments. Yeah? What does it say?
This outturn, reflected higher interest payments, which constituted 64.1% of this increase, and to a lesser extent, principal repayments. Interest payments continued to trend upward.
No, but don't go so fast. Interest payments continue to trend upward. We're reviewing the 12 months. The Saint Lucia Labour Party government is in power. They are managing the finances. They convinced the people of Saint Lucia that they are very strong financial managers. But they, under them, interest payments continue to trend upwards. Let's go by how much?
Accelerating by 17.4% to a high of 210.8 million in 2023, mostly on account of larger payments on external loans and domestic bonds.
There you go. So this tells you that they're not managing the debt of the country properly. If you're going to borrow $388 million in a year when there's no pandemic, there's no COVID-19, there's no financial crisis, there is no economic disaster, there's no natural disaster that's taking place in the country. So for me, the only COVID is the Saint Lucia Labour Party. And this, for me, represents a total disaster in the management of our debt. It also highlighted the time in which people are calling in their bonds. So Bradley will tell you that the government has an average of 8 years, 1 to 8 years for bonds. But they haven't been able to get that because people are asking for their money a lot earlier. And that's been having a problem on their cash flow. So if you go to page 70, you'll see the average time of maturity on page 70. And read what it says. Average time of maturity. Here.
The average time of maturity, the ATM, decreased from 6.1 years at the end of December 2022 to 5.8 years at the end of December 2023, remaining well below the target of 8 years or more.
Right. So the target 8 years for people to call in on their bonds to mature, but they haven't been able to do so because people are just asking for their money earlier.
So now they understand what the situation is when Cabot, the investors in Cabot, paid back earlier the loan that they'd taken from NIC, and how NIC actually lost because because they paid back earlier.
Yeah. So the debt situation of the country is not by any means on stable footing. I know you want to get into other discussions, but I think that these are the crucial points in debt, high interest, shorter loans.
Now, we've run out of time, again. We've run out of time. And I'll start from the other end of the table. Honorable Bradley Felix, tell us in 1 minute, sum up your the report card for this government in terms of what we've discussed this evening.
Well, I will do more than some of the report card. I was indicating to Herod before we started that one of the things that I'm very not happy about as it relates to us as St. Lucians is that I vividly remember under the last administration of which I was part of, there were so many people, civil society, the Bar Association, various groups who are extremely vocal as it relates to listening to what the then opposition said without fact checking, and they were just on the last administration's, as we say in our local term, on the last administration back, calling for a new way of thinking, and now where the facts are very glaring, and we don't just say things without bringing the facts, as we have brought to you the economic and social review with the facts. We see various things happening with regards to various deals, and there seems to be a silence. Nobody wants to speak. Now you must ask yourself, why? Is it a fear for victimization or some kind of repercussion, or is it that people are just biding their time, and just waiting for whenever that time is called to make a very decisive statement as to the way forward? But I'm a bit concerned that we have a very quiet society from people who I know who are a lot more vocal. And it begs the question, why? It really begs the question, because there are so many things that seem to be going in the wrong direction, and there is that very glaring, very glaring silence. So I'm calling on St. Lucians to hopefully that whatever mistakes may have been done in the past by listening to various propaganda machines, that now people could actually decipher the facts for themselves, You know, there's a lot in black and white. Don't listen to the fancy words, don't listen to the fancy promises, the propaganda. Think for yourselves. We are an intelligent nation. We can think for ourselves. And let us start speaking on behalf of our beautiful country in terms of where we want to see our country go and grow. Okay? Because otherwise, you know, our silence may one day, we will no longer be able to speak aloud, and that is my concern. And so I'm calling on all people, you know, to please, you know, make your voices be heard.
Senator Stanislas.
Okay, thank you very much, Laura, for having me tonight on the panel. Clearly, the Economic and Social Review is very revealing, the report card of this government, but at the same time, it is very worrisome. We can see clearly that, you know, Saint Lucia is the worst performing economy in the ECCU. You know, our inflation rate is amongst the second or the third highest. You know, debt has increased by over 8%. Interest payments on debt by a whopping 17%. You know, agriculture, every sector of agriculture is in decline. Our tourism numbers are not anything for us to be happy about. We're still at 80% of pre-pandemic levels, and of course the debt is on an unsustainable path, Laura, and this is very, very worrying for us as a country. And I believe that the government needs to listen, and they need to trend in a different direction, because if not, Saint Lucia is going to find itself in a very, very difficult situation, and many persons are going to suffer the consequences of this government's inability to manage the affairs of this country. So I'm just asking St. Lucians to be vigilant, you know, to not to allow this government to manipulate them with their fancy words, you know, and the empty promises. The country is in very serious trouble. The economy is not doing as well as the government is portraying it to be. And we as an opposition will continue to hold this Prime Minister, this government accountable. I thank you.
Thank you, Senator Fedee.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, for this interview today. I think we all had a lot of fun. It was very important that we come and to discuss the pertinent issues affecting the country. You know, we are presiding over a state of low growth, high cost of living, high borrowing, and an infrastructure that is waning in the country. When we look at the management of the country overall, questions that emerge in our minds: are we being driven by the right captain? When we look at deals like global ports and the halls of justice and so many more decisions, St. Jude's Hospital, we then ask ourselves, are we going in the right direction? Are we, the people of St. Lucia, pleased with where we are? Are we going to accept a big national party like jazz or carnival or the World Cup to distract us? Or are we more intelligent to decipher for ourselves the very crucial decisions that need to be made to bring the prices of food in the country down, that support our agriculture sector, that ensure that we maximize returns from sectors like tourism, to work faster to beef up our infrastructure, to ensure that our water supply in the country is more reliable? I think you will agree with me when I say that we need to choose the latter. I want to thank you, Laura, and to thank your viewers for joining us.
Thank you so very much, gentlemen, for being here. Senator, you've heard it. You've heard it. You've heard them explain it. You've heard the words directly from the report card. It's not good. And I want to leave you with those parting words. When your circumstances change, it is okay to change your mind. Do not compound your mistakes by doubling down 10 toes. It is in your capacity to change the trajectory of our economy. The vote is in your hands. Do not be distracted. Until next week, adieu.